Hey, dear friends, listen. The toughest individuals you've ever encountered didn't reach that level because they had an army behind them. They got there because they figured out how to succeed when the world wasn't paying attention. They cracked the code of thriving in solitude, not from misanthropy, but from understanding something profound that most folks miss entirely. Genuine power isn't forged in the spotlight. It's constructed in silence. It's built when exhaustion hits, when self-doubt creeps in, when every external voice screams, "Give up," and you press forward regardless. Here's the truth. Most individuals require perpetual cheerleading. They need someone prodding them forward. They crave recognition. They need constant reminders of their worth. And the second that scaffolding crumbles, they collapse entirely. But there exists a different category of human being, someone who's mastered self-sufficiency, someone who's constructed psychological frameworks so resilient that external turbulence can't destabilize them, someone who's perfected the craft of mental autonomy. If you're serious about constructing an existence that doesn't shatter every time circumstances shift, you need to understand the psychology of succeeding independently. Not because you're avoiding people, but because you're rejecting dependency. You're building something internal that nobody can confiscate. Section 1. Nobody's coming to rescue. Here's what nobody wants to admit. Nobody is arriving to save you. That's not pessimism. That's the cornerstone of genuine personal authority. The instant you embrace that your achievements, your fulfillment, your development, and your destiny rest entirely in your hands, you stop being a casualty of circumstances and transform into the designer of your existence. Yet most individuals spend decades waiting for the perfect guide, waiting for someone to recognize their potential, waiting for authorization, waiting for validation. And during that waiting period, years evaporate. Possibilities vanish. Potential gets smothered beneath the burden of reliance. Understanding how to win independently begins with accepting total ownership of your results. Not just the victories, everything. The failures, the obstacles, the errors, the squandered chances. When you claim responsibility for everything, you reclaim your authority. You stop attributing blame to external forces and start constructing internal fortitude. You stop searching outward for solutions and start generating them from within. This doesn't mean rejecting wisdom from others or declining assistance when it's presented. It means you don't depend on external sources for your emotional equilibrium, your drive, or your sense of purpose. You construct these elements inside yourself so completely that whether people champion you or desert you becomes irrelevant to your advancement. You become emotionally self-sufficient. Think about truly accomplished individuals in your world. Really examine their trajectory. Sure, they might have had advisors or advocates occasionally, but fundamentally, they were propelled by something internal. They possessed a fire that burned independent of external recognition. They maintained standards that didn't fluctuate based on popular opinion. They held a vision so crystalline that criticism couldn't obscure it and compliments couldn't divert them from it. The reason most individuals never unlock their potential is they're perpetually seeking external fuel for an internal mechanism. They want someone else to supply the energy, the navigation, the assurance. But sustainable achievement isn't constructed that way. External inspiration is fleeting. It appears and disappears with people's temperaments, schedules, and priorities. If your progress hinges on others sustaining passion for your ambitions, you're constructing your future on quicksand. When you abandon the search for a savior, something powerful occurs. You start cultivating self-trust. You start trusting your own assessment. You start resolving your own challenges. You stop manufacturing excuses about lacking the proper support network and start becoming your own support network. You develop an inner conversation that's uplifting rather than defeating. You create personal rituals that keep you anchored. You build practices that operate independent of external circumstances. This psychological shift is profound because it transforms how you present yourself to the world. You stop being desperate. You stop seeking validation for every choice. You stop requiring permission before taking initiative. You become someone who moves with quiet assurance because your strength emanates from within, not from the masses. Here's what's interesting. People can detect this energy. They respect it. They're attracted to it. Ironically, when you stop needing people to rescue you, more people want to champion you. The practice starts with modest choices. Stop requesting advice on matters you already understand. Stop seeking permission for choices that align with your principles. Stop waiting for someone to declare it's acceptable to chase your objectives. Start making decisions based on your own evaluation of what's correct and necessary. Start developing the practice of consulting your inner wisdom before seeking external perspectives. Construct systems that reinforce your autonomy. Create morning protocols that establish your mindset regardless of what others are doing. Develop evening reflections that help you process daily events without needing to debrief with someone else. Learn to sit with discomfort without immediately reaching out for comfort from others. These practices strengthen your psychological autonomy and reduce your emotional dependence on external validation. The objective isn't isolation or antisocial behavior. The objective is becoming so internally powerful that you can engage with others from a position of strength rather than neediness. You offer value instead of seeking it. You provide support instead of constantly requiring it. You become someone others can depend on because you've learned to depend on yourself first. Remember, waiting for someone to rescue you is just another form of procrastination. It's avoiding the responsibility of rescuing yourself. But when you embrace that responsibility, when you stop looking outward and start building inward, you discover something remarkable. You possess the power all along. You just needed to stop surrendering it. Section 2. Construct your personal measurement system. Most individuals spend their entire existence playing to the wrong scoreboard. They measure their value by external metrics, social media engagement, public approval, how impressive they appear to observers. But winners operate differently. They construct a personal measurement system that evaluates what genuinely matters: character, effort, growth, and alignment with their values. This internal assessment system allows them to maintain motivation when external recognition is absent and remain grounded when external praise is abundant. Your personal measurement system is your private metric framework for achievement. It's founded on standards you establish for yourself, not standards imposed by society, family, or peers. It measures things like, did I give my maximum effort today? Did I act in alignment with my principles? Did I push through when I wanted to surrender? Did I learn something new? Did I assist someone without expecting reciprocation? These are the metrics that genuinely predict long-term success and satisfaction. The problem with external scorecards is they're controlled by other individuals. Someone else decides whether to grant you recognition. Someone else determines whether your work is valued. Someone else chooses whether to validate your efforts. When you base your self-worth on external validation, you're essentially surrendering control of your emotional state to people who may not have your best interests at heart, who may not comprehend your vision, or who may be wrestling with their own insecurities and limitations. Constructing a personal measurement system requires clarity about what you genuinely value, not what you think you should value, not what others tell you to value, but what authentically matters to you at a fundamental level. This demands honest self-examination. You need to identify the principles that will guide your decisions regardless of external circumstances. These might include integrity, growth, contribution, excellence, authenticity, or courage. Once you identify these core values, they become the foundation of your internal assessment system. The personal scorecard also measures process over outcomes. While external scorecards focus on results you can't always control, internal scorecards focus on efforts you can always control. Did you show up consistently? Did you maintain your standards when it was challenging? Did you stay focused on your priorities despite distractions? These process-oriented metrics are more reliable predictors of long-term achievement because they're entirely within your control. This doesn't mean you ignore external feedback or become oblivious to how others perceive your work. It means you filter external input through your internal framework. You listen to feedback that helps you improve while ignoring criticism that's based on jealousy, misunderstanding, or conflicting values. You appreciate recognition when it arrives, but don't depend on it for motivation. You use external results as information rather than validation. One of the most powerful aspects of a personal scorecard is that it allows you to find satisfaction in the process rather than just the outcome. When your measurement system is based on effort, growth, and character, you can feel successful even when external results are delayed. You can maintain motivation during the inevitable periods when progress feels slow or invisible. You can stay committed to your path even when others don't understand or support your choices. Constructing this internal measurement system also protects you from the emotional volatility that comes with external validation. When your self-worth is tied to others' opinions, you're constantly riding an emotional roller coaster. Positive feedback lifts you up. Criticism brings you down. But when your scorecard is internal, you maintain emotional stability regardless of external circumstances. You develop steady confidence that's not dependent on others' moods or judgments. The practice of maintaining a personal scorecard requires daily self-assessment. At the end of each day, ask yourself, how did I do according to my own standards? Where did I excel? Where did I fall short? What can I improve tomorrow? This isn't about being harsh on yourself. It's about being honest and intentional. It's about taking responsibility for your effort and character rather than just your results. Over time, operating from a personal scorecard develops what psychologists call an internal locus of control. You begin to see yourself as the primary driver of your outcomes rather than a victim of circumstances. You take more initiative because you're not waiting for external validation to act. You become more resilient because setbacks don't shake your fundamental sense of worth. You develop authentic confidence because it's based on your own assessment rather than others' opinions. The personal scorecard also allows you to celebrate private victories that external observers might never notice. The day you chose discipline over comfort. The moment you acted with integrity when nobody was watching. The time you persisted through difficulty without complaining. These victories might not earn external recognition, but they build character and strength that no external achievement can provide. Remember, the goal isn't to become indifferent to external feedback or recognition. The goal is to develop a measurement system that doesn't depend on external validation for your sense of worth and direction. When you measure yourself by your own standards, when you celebrate your own growth, when you recognize your own effort, you become psychologically independent. You become someone who can win alone because your scorecard is always with you. Section 3. Generate your own drive. Self-motivation is the capacity to generate energy, enthusiasm, and determination from within, rather than relying on external sources to fuel your actions. It's the difference between a compass and a weather vane. A weather vane simply points wherever the wind blows, while a compass maintains direction regardless of external forces. Masters of self-motivation are compasses. They create their own momentum and maintain their own standards independent of their circumstances or surroundings. The foundation of self-motivation is understanding the distinction between internal and external drive. External drive comes from outside rewards, money, recognition, approval, or avoiding punishment. While these can be effective short-term motivators, they're unreliable for long-term success because they depend on factors outside your control. Internal drive comes from inner satisfaction, the joy of learning, the satisfaction of growth, the fulfillment of contributing, or the pleasure of mastering a skill. This type of motivation is sustainable because it's generated internally and isn't dependent on external circumstances. Developing self-motivation requires connecting your daily actions to deeper purposes. It's not enough to know what you want to accomplish. You need to understand why you want to accomplish it. What values does this goal serve? How does this action align with your vision of who you want to become? What impact will achieving this have on your life and the lives of others? When your actions are connected to meaningful purposes, you generate motivation from within, rather than needing external pushes. Self-motivated individuals have learned to create their own feedback loops. Instead of waiting for others to tell them they're doing well, they develop internal systems for recognizing progress and celebrating achievements. They keep private records of their growth. They acknowledge their own improvements. They celebrate personal milestones. This internal feedback system provides consistent motivation because it doesn't depend on others' attention or recognition. One of the most important skills in self-motivation is learning to motivate yourself when you don't feel like it. Motivation isn't just about enthusiasm. It's about the ability to take action regardless of your emotional state. Self-motivated people understand that motivation often follows action rather than preceding it. They don't wait to feel motivated. They act first and let motivation catch up. They have learned that discipline creates momentum, and momentum creates motivation. Self-motivation also requires developing a strong relationship with your future self. You need to become skilled at visualizing the person you're becoming and the life you're building. When present actions feel difficult or unrewarding, the ability to connect with your future vision provides the energy to persist. You're not just doing difficult things for abstract goals. You're doing them for the specific person you're committed to becoming. Another crucial aspect of self-motivation is learning to reframe challenges and setbacks. Instead of seeing obstacles as reasons to quit, self-motivated people see them as opportunities to grow stronger. They understand that difficulty is not evidence that they're on the wrong path. It's evidence that they're building character and capabilities. This reframing ability allows them to maintain motivation even when external circumstances are challenging. Self-motivated people also develop rituals and routines that generate energy and focus. These might include morning routines that set a positive tone for the day, workout routines that build physical and mental strength, or evening routines that provide reflection and planning time. These rituals create consistency and structure that support sustained motivation regardless of external circumstances. The practice of self-motivation requires developing a strong internal dialogue. Most people have an internal critic that focuses on what's wrong, what's missing, or what's difficult. Self-motivated people have learned to cultivate an internal coach that focuses on what's possible, what's improving, and what's within their control. They speak to themselves with the same encouragement and support they would offer a good friend facing similar challenges. Self-motivation is also about learning to find energy in the process, rather than just the outcome. When you can appreciate the journey of growth, learning, and development, you don't need external rewards to sustain your effort. You find satisfaction in the daily practice of improvement. You enjoy the challenge of becoming better than you were yesterday. This process-oriented approach to motivation is more sustainable because it's available every day, not just when you achieve major milestones. Developing self-motivation requires accepting responsibility for your emotional state. Instead of believing that your motivation depends on external circumstances, you recognize that it's something you create and maintain. You stop waiting for the right conditions to feel motivated and start creating motivation regardless of conditions. You become someone who generates energy, rather than someone who waits for energy to come to them. The ultimate goal of mastering self-motivation is to become psychologically independent. You're no longer at the mercy of others' moods, recognition, or support. You've developed the ability to maintain enthusiasm and effort regardless of external circumstances. This independence doesn't make you cold or disconnected. It makes you more valuable in relationships because you're contributing from strength rather than need. Remember, self-motivation is a skill that develops over time through practice. Start by connecting your daily actions to your deeper values. Develop internal feedback systems that recognize your progress. Create rituals that generate energy and focus. Practice taking action when you don't feel like it. Over time, you'll develop the ability to generate motivation from within, making you someone who can maintain progress and momentum regardless of external support or recognition. Section 4. Take full ownership of your emotional state. Emotional ownership is the capacity to maintain your emotional balance regardless of external circumstances or other people's behavior. It's not about becoming emotionally numb or disconnected. It's about developing the strength to feel your emotions fully while not being controlled by them or dependent on others to regulate them for you. This skill is crucial for succeeding independently because it allows you to maintain clarity, make sound decisions, and stay focused on your goals even when external support is absent or when others are actively opposing your efforts. Most individuals are emotionally dependent without realizing it. Their mood depends on how others treat them. Their confidence fluctuates based on external validation. Their sense of worth rises and falls with others' opinions. Their emotional state is essentially controlled by factors outside themselves, making them vulnerable to manipulation and inconsistency. Emotional ownership means taking full responsibility for your emotional experience and developing the skills to manage it effectively. The foundation of emotional ownership is self-awareness. You need to understand your emotional patterns, triggers, and responses. What situations consistently affect your mood? Which types of people or comments tend to throw you off balance? How do you typically react when stressed, criticized, or disappointed? This awareness allows you to anticipate emotional challenges and prepare appropriate responses rather than being caught off guard by your own reactions. Emotional ownership requires developing the ability to self-regulate instead of relying on others to comfort you when you're upset, validate you when you're insecure, or calm you when you're anxious. You learn to provide these emotional services for yourself. This might involve breathing techniques, meditation, physical exercise, journaling, or simply learning to sit with uncomfortable emotions without immediately trying to escape or fix them. One of the most important aspects of emotional ownership is learning to separate your worth from others' treatment of you. How others behave toward you says more about them than about you. Their criticism might reflect their own insecurities. Their lack of support might indicate their own limitations. Their negativity might stem from their own struggles. When you understand this, you stop taking others' behavior personally and maintain your emotional stability regardless of how they treat you. Emotional ownership also means developing the courage to feel difficult emotions without immediately seeking external comfort. Most people are so uncomfortable with feelings like loneliness, fear, sadness, or anxiety that they'll do anything to avoid or escape these emotions. But emotional ownership requires the willingness to experience the full range of human emotions without being overwhelmed by them or dependent on others to manage them. This doesn't mean suppressing emotions or pretending they don't exist. It means developing the capacity to feel emotions fully while maintaining perspective and choice about how to respond. You can feel angry without acting destructively. You can feel sad without becoming depressed. You can feel afraid without becoming paralyzed. You can feel lonely without becoming desperate for company. Emotional ownership requires setting clear boundaries with others. This means not taking responsibility for managing others' emotions, while also not expecting others to manage yours. You can offer support and empathy without becoming emotionally entangled in others' problems. You can receive feedback and criticism without internalizing others' judgments about your worth. Developing emotional ownership also involves learning to validate yourself, rather than constantly seeking validation from others. You learn to recognize your own growth, acknowledge your own efforts, and appreciate your own qualities. You develop an internal source of encouragement and support that doesn't depend on external recognition or approval. One practical aspect of emotional ownership is learning to make decisions based on your values and goals, rather than your emotions. Emotions provide important information, but they shouldn't be the primary driver of your choices. You can feel scared about taking a risk while still choosing to take it if it aligns with your goals. You can feel disappointed about a setback while still choosing to persist toward your objective. Emotional ownership requires developing emotional resilience, which is the ability to bounce back from emotional challenges without being permanently affected. This involves learning from difficult experiences rather than being traumatized by them, maintaining perspective during emotional storms, and developing the confidence that you can handle whatever emotions arise. The practice of emotional ownership involves daily attention to your emotional state. Without being controlled by it, you check in with yourself regularly. How am I feeling? What's driving these emotions? What do I need right now? How can I best care for myself? This isn't self-obsession, it's self-management. It's taking responsibility for your emotional well-being rather than making it someone else's responsibility. Emotional ownership also means learning to enjoy your own company. Many people are so uncomfortable with solitude because they're uncomfortable with their own thoughts and feelings. But when you develop emotional ownership, you can spend time alone without feeling lonely, make decisions without consensus, and find contentment without external entertainment or validation. The goal of emotional ownership isn't to become emotionally invulnerable or disconnected from others. It's to become emotionally stable and self-sufficient so that you can engage with others from a position of strength rather than need. You can offer genuine love and support because you're not desperately seeking it. You can maintain healthy relationships because you're not depending on others to complete you emotionally. Remember, emotional ownership is developed gradually through practice and self-reflection. Start by paying attention to your emotional patterns and triggers. Practice self-regulation techniques when you're upset. Set boundaries with people who consistently drain your emotional energy. Learn to validate yourself rather than constantly seeking external approval. Over time, you'll develop the emotional strength to maintain your equilibrium regardless of external circumstances, making you someone who can truly win alone. Section 5. Design personal frameworks that sustain momentum. Personal frameworks are the invisible structures that support your progress when external motivation is absent. They're the personal routines, habits, and processes you develop to maintain momentum regardless of circumstances. These frameworks operate independently of other people's involvement, recognition, or support, making them essential for anyone who wants to achieve sustained success without depending on external factors. The power of personal frameworks lies in their consistency and reliability. While external motivation fluctuates based on other people's moods, availability, and interests, personal frameworks function regardless of external conditions. They provide structure when life feels chaotic, momentum when energy is low, and direction when the path seems unclear. They're the difference between people who maintain progress consistently and those whose efforts rise and fall with their circumstances. Creating effective personal frameworks requires understanding the psychology of habit formation and behavior change. The most successful frameworks are built on principles that make desired behaviors easier and undesired behaviors harder. They work with your natural psychological tendencies rather than against them. They're designed to function even when motivation is low, energy is depleted, or external support is unavailable. The foundation of any personal framework is clarity about your objectives and values. You can't create effective frameworks without knowing what you're trying to achieve and why it matters to you. Your frameworks should be designed to move you consistently toward your goals while reinforcing the values that guide your decisions. This alignment ensures that your daily actions are building the life you actually want, rather than just keeping you busy. Morning protocols are one of the most powerful personal frameworks because they set the tone for your entire day. A well-designed morning protocol ensures that you start each day with intention, energy, and focus, regardless of what happened the day before or what challenges lie ahead. Your morning protocol might include exercise, meditation, planning, reading, or journaling. The specific activities matter less than their consistency and their alignment with your goals and values. Evening protocols are equally important because they help you process the day's events, prepare for the next day, and transition into rest. An effective evening protocol might include reviewing your progress, planning tomorrow's priorities, reflecting on lessons learned, or simply creating space for relaxation and recovery. These protocols help you maintain perspective and continuity, even when individual days feel challenging or unproductive. Tracking frameworks are another crucial component of personal frameworks. You need ways to monitor your progress that don't depend on external recognition or feedback. This might involve keeping a journal of your daily actions, maintaining charts of key metrics, or simply checking off completed tasks. The act of tracking itself often improves performance because it creates awareness and accountability, even when no one else is watching. Personal frameworks should also include decision-making structures that help you choose wisely when facing common dilemmas. For example, you might develop criteria for deciding which opportunities to pursue, which commitments to make, or how to spend your discretionary time. Having pre-established structures reduces decision fatigue and helps ensure that your choices align with your priorities even when you're tired or stressed. Effective personal frameworks include both productive routines and recovery routines. It's not enough to have frameworks that drive you forward. You also need frameworks that help you rest, recharge, and maintain perspective. This might include weekly reviews, monthly assessments, or regular breaks from intensive work. Balance isn't just important for well-being, it's essential for sustainable performance. Your personal frameworks should be designed to function in various circumstances. They need to work when you're at home and when you're traveling, when you have plenty of time and when you're rushed, when you feel motivated and when you don't. This requires building flexibility into your frameworks while maintaining their essential elements. You might have full versions for ideal conditions and minimal versions for challenging circumstances. Personal frameworks also need to evolve as you grow and your circumstances change. What works at one stage of your life or career might need adjustment as you face new challenges or pursue different goals. Regular review and refinement of your frameworks ensures they continue to serve your evolving needs rather than becoming rigid routines that no longer align with your objectives. The key to successful personal frameworks is starting small and building gradually. It's better to have a simple framework that you follow consistently than a complex framework that you abandon when life gets challenging. Begin with 1 or 2 core habits and gradually add elements as they become automatic. This approach builds momentum and confidence while avoiding the overwhelm that often leads to abandoning new frameworks entirely. Personal frameworks should also include methods for handling setbacks and disruptions. Life will interfere with your routines occasionally, and effective frameworks include strategies for getting back on track quickly, rather than allowing temporary disruptions to become permanent departures. This might involve simplified versions of your routines for difficult periods or specific protocols for restarting after interruptions. The psychological benefit of personal frameworks extends beyond their practical utility. Having reliable frameworks builds confidence because you know you can maintain progress regardless of circumstances. They provide a sense of control in an unpredictable world. They create stability and structure that supports both performance and well-being. They demonstrate to yourself that you're serious about your goals and committed to your growth. Remember, the most powerful frameworks are often the simplest ones. They don't need to be elaborate or impressive. They need to be sustainable and effective. Focus on creating frameworks that you can maintain consistently, rather than frameworks that look perfect on paper but fail in practice. Your personal frameworks are tools for achieving your goals, not goals in themselves. Design them to serve your objectives and adjust them as needed to maintain their effectiveness over time. Section 6. Develop confidence in your own judgment. Trusting your own judgment is one of the most critical skills for psychological independence, yet it's something most people struggle with their entire lives. They second-guess themselves constantly, seeking validation for decisions they're perfectly capable of making on their own. They poll friends, family, and strangers on social media about choices that only they can truly evaluate. This constant external consultation weakens their decision-making muscle and creates a dependency that undermines their ability to navigate life confidently and independently. The inability to trust your own judgment often stems from past experiences where you made mistakes or faced criticism for your decisions. Maybe you chose poorly in a relationship, made a financial error, or pursued a path that didn't work out as planned. These experiences can create doubt about your decision-making abilities, leading you to seek external validation as a form of protection against future mistakes. But this protection comes at a cost. It prevents you from developing the very skill you need most. Trusting your judgment doesn't mean believing you'll never make mistakes. It means accepting that making your own mistakes is better than living someone else's life perfectly. Your mistakes teach you lessons that are specifically relevant to your situation, values, and goals. When you constantly defer to others' opinions, you miss these learning opportunities and remain dependent on external guidance for situations that only you fully understand. The foundation of good judgment is self-knowledge. You need to understand your values, priorities, strengths, weaknesses, and goals before you can make decisions that truly serve your best interests. Most people struggle with decision-making not because they lack intelligence, but because they lack clarity about what they actually want and why they want it. When you know yourself deeply, decisions become easier because you have clear criteria for evaluation. Developing trust in your judgment requires starting with smaller, lower-stakes decisions and building your confidence gradually. Instead of seeking advice about what to wear, where to eat, or how to spend your weekend, make these choices independently and notice how they turn out. Pay attention to your decision-making process. What factors do you consider? How do you weigh different options? What feels right intuitively versus what seems logical analytically? One of the biggest obstacles to trusting your judgment is the fear of other people's disapproval. You worry that if you make a choice others disagree with, you'll face criticism, rejection, or social consequences. This fear leads many people to make decisions designed to please others rather than serve their own best interests. But seeking approval through your choices is a form of self-betrayal that ultimately leads to resentment and regret. Learning to trust your judgment also means accepting that you have access to information about your situation that others don't have. You know your financial situation, your relationship dynamics, your career aspirations, your health concerns, and your personal history in ways that even your closest advisors cannot fully understand. This insider knowledge makes you uniquely qualified to make decisions about your own life, even if others have more experience or expertise in general. The practice of trusting your judgment involves learning to distinguish between seeking advice and seeking approval. Seeking advice means gathering information and perspectives to help you make a better decision while maintaining responsibility for the final choice. Seeking approval means looking for someone else to validate a decision you've already made or to make the decision for you. The first approach strengthens your judgment. The second weakens it. Developing good judgment also requires learning to sit with uncertainty and ambiguity. Most decisions involve incomplete information and unknown outcomes. People who struggle to trust their judgment often seek more information or more opinions, hoping to eliminate uncertainty before making a choice. But this approach often leads to analysis paralysis and missed opportunities. Learning to make good decisions with imperfect information is a crucial skill for independence. Your judgment improves through practice and reflection. After making decisions, pay attention to how they turn out. What went well? What could you have considered more carefully? What patterns do you notice in your decision-making? This reflection helps you learn from experience and refine your judgment over time. It also builds confidence as you notice that your decisions generally serve your interests well, even when they don't turn out perfectly. Trusting your judgment also means learning to live with the consequences of your choices without constant regret or second-guessing. Every decision involves trade-offs, and even good decisions sometimes lead to difficult outcomes due to factors beyond your control. The ability to accept responsibility for your choices and learn from their consequences without being paralyzed by regret is essential for maintaining confidence in your decision-making abilities. One practical way to build trust in your judgment is to develop decision-making frameworks that reflect your values and priorities. These frameworks help you evaluate options consistently and make choices that align with your long-term interests. For example, you might always consider how a decision affects your health, relationships, financial stability, and personal growth. Having clear criteria makes decision-making more systematic and builds confidence in your choices. Learning to trust your judgment also involves recognizing the difference between intuition and impulse. Intuition is the unconscious processing of information and experience that leads to insights about what's right for you. Impulse is the immediate desire for gratification without consideration of long-term consequences. Both can feel like internal guidance, but they lead to very different outcomes. Learning to distinguish between them helps you make decisions that serve your long-term interests. The goal isn't to become completely self-reliant in decision-making or to ignore valuable input from others. The goal is to develop enough confidence in your judgment that you can consider others' perspectives without being dependent on their approval. You can seek advice while maintaining responsibility for your choices. You can consider criticism without internalizing it as truth about your worth or capabilities. Trusting your judgment also means accepting that some people won't understand or support your decisions, and that's okay. Your choices don't need to make sense to everyone. They need to make sense to you. When you base decisions on your own assessment of what's right rather than what's popular or expected, you develop authentic confidence that can't be shaken by others' disapproval. The ultimate benefit of trusting your own judgment is freedom. Freedom from the exhausting process of constantly seeking external validation. Freedom from the resentment that comes from living according to others' expectations. Freedom from the paralysis that comes from fear of making mistakes. When you trust your judgment, you become someone who can make decisions quickly and confidently, adapt to changing circumstances, and take responsibility for your life's direction. Remember, building trust in your judgment is a gradual process that requires patience and self-compassion. You'll make mistakes, and sometimes others' advice would have led to better outcomes. But the confidence and independence you develop by learning to trust yourself are worth more than the safety of always deferring to others. Start with small decisions. Reflect on your choices and gradually take on bigger decisions as your confidence grows. Over time, you'll develop the judgment and self-trust that allow you to navigate life independently and authentically. Section 7. Release the need for universal approval. The need for approval is one of the most limiting psychological patterns that keeps people from achieving their full potential. When you constantly seek others' validation for your choices, dreams, and direction, you give away your power to people who may not understand your vision, share your values, or want what's best for you. This approval-seeking behavior creates a life lived in reaction to others' expectations, rather than in alignment with your authentic desires and capabilities. Most people develop approval-seeking behaviors early in life as a survival mechanism. Children naturally seek approval from parents, teachers, and peers because acceptance often determines access to resources, safety, and belonging. This pattern becomes problematic when it continues into adulthood, where the pursuit of approval often conflicts with the pursuit of authenticity and achievement. Adult success frequently requires making choices that others don't understand or support. The psychology behind approval seeking is rooted in the fear of rejection and the misconception that others' opinions determine your worth. When you believe that your value as a person depends on others' approval, every criticism feels like a threat to your identity, and every rejection feels like evidence of your inadequacy. This creates a cycle where you modify your behavior, goals, and choices to gain acceptance, gradually moving further away from your authentic self. One of the most destructive aspects of approval seeking is that it's never fully satisfied. Even when you receive the approval you're seeking, it's temporary and conditional. People's opinions change, their attention moves elsewhere, and their support depends on factors beyond your control. This means that approval-based validation is inherently unstable, keeping you in a constant state of anxiety about maintaining others' positive regard. The path to psychological independence requires recognizing that seeking approval and achieving excellence are often incompatible goals. Excellence requires taking risks, making unpopular choices, enduring criticism, and persisting through periods when others doubt your direction. If you need constant approval, you'll avoid the very behaviors that lead to exceptional results. You'll choose safety over growth, conformity over innovation, and acceptance over achievement. Breaking free from approval. Seeking begins with understanding that other people's opinions about your path are largely irrelevant. They don't have to live with the consequences of your choices. You do. They don't understand the full context of your situation, capabilities, and aspirations. You do. They're viewing your life through the lens of their own experiences, limitations, and biases. You're living it from the inside. This makes their approval or disapproval largely meaningless as a guide for your decisions. The fear of disapproval often stems from catastrophic thinking about the consequences of others' negative opinions. You imagine that criticism will lead to rejection, isolation, or failure. But in reality, most people are too focused on their own lives to spend much time judging yours. Those who do criticize your choices often do so from their own insecurities or limitations. Learning to see criticism as information about the critic, rather than truth about you, helps reduce its emotional impact. Stopping the pursuit of approval requires developing internal sources of validation. Instead of seeking external confirmation that you're on the right path, you need to develop the ability to assess your progress against your own standards and values. This means celebrating your growth, acknowledging your efforts, and recognizing your achievements without needing others to validate them first. One practical approach to reducing approval seeking is to practice making decisions without consulting others when their input isn't truly necessary. Start with small choices like what to wear, what to eat, or how to spend your free time. Notice the urge to seek validation and resist it. Pay attention to how these independent decisions feel and how they turn out. This practice builds confidence in your ability to choose wisely without external input. The process of breaking free from approval seeking also involves examining whose approval you're seeking and why. Often, people seek validation from individuals whose opinions shouldn't carry much weight in their lives. You might find yourself caring more about acquaintances' opinions than your closest friends' support, or seeking approval from people whose lives and choices you don't actually respect. Recognizing these patterns helps you redirect your attention to sources of feedback that are actually valuable. Learning to accept disapproval as a natural part of pursuing excellence is crucial for psychological independence. Every significant achievement involves making choices that some people won't understand or support. Innovation requires challenging existing ideas. Leadership requires making unpopular decisions. Growth requires leaving comfort zones that others want you to share with them. Disapproval isn't evidence that you're wrong. It's often evidence that you're doing something significant. Developing comfort with disapproval doesn't mean becoming indifferent to others or deliberately seeking conflict. It means accepting that you can't control others' opinions and shouldn't let their potential disapproval prevent you from pursuing your authentic path. You can remain considerate and respectful while making choices that others don't understand or support. The practice of not seeking approval also involves learning to share your plans and progress selectively. Not everyone needs to know about your goals, and not everyone's opinion about them is valuable. Sharing your aspirations with people who don't understand or support them often leads to discouragement and doubt. Learning to keep your own counsel and share your journey only with those who genuinely support your growth protects your motivation and confidence. One of the most liberating realizations is that the people whose approval you're seeking often aren't living the kind of life you want to live. They may be satisfied with mediocrity, afraid of risk, or limited by their own beliefs about what's possible. Seeking approval from people who haven't achieved what you want to achieve is like asking for directions from someone who's never been where you want to go. Breaking free from approval seeking also requires accepting responsibility for your choices and their consequences. When you make decisions based on others' approval, you can blame them if things don't work out. When you make decisions based on your own judgment, you have to accept full responsibility for the outcomes. This responsibility can feel frightening, but it's also empowering because it means you have control over your life's direction. The ultimate goal isn't to become completely indifferent to others' opinions or to avoid all feedback. Constructive feedback from people you respect can be valuable for growth and improvement. The goal is to become selective about whose opinions matter to you and to base your major life decisions on your own assessment of what's right, rather than what's popular or expected. Remember, the approval you're seeking from others is often something you need to give yourself first. When you approve of your own choices, when you validate your own progress, when you support your own dreams, others' opinions become much less important. You stop seeking external validation because you've developed a reliable internal source. This shift transforms you from someone who reacts to others' expectations into someone who acts from authentic conviction, making you truly capable of winning alone. Section 8. Strengthen your mind through intentional solitude. Solitude is one of the most powerful tools for building mental strength, yet most people avoid it desperately. They fill every quiet moment with distractions, surround themselves with constant noise, and feel uncomfortable when left alone with their thoughts. This avoidance of solitude weakens their psychological foundation because it prevents them from developing the inner resources necessary for true independence and resilience. Mental strength isn't built in crowds. It's forged in the quiet spaces where you face yourself without external distractions. The difference between loneliness and solitude is crucial to understand. Loneliness is the painful feeling of being disconnected from others, often accompanied by sadness, anxiety, or desperation for company. Solitude is the intentional practice of spending time alone for reflection, growth, and inner development. Loneliness is something that happens to you. Solitude is something you choose. One weakens you, the other strengthens you. Modern society has created a culture that's afraid of silence and uncomfortable with introspection. We're constantly connected, perpetually entertained, and continuously stimulated. This external focus prevents many people from developing the internal awareness and strength that comes from regular periods of solitude. Without time alone with their thoughts, they never learn to understand themselves, process their experiences, or develop their own perspectives independent of external influences. Solitude provides the mental space necessary for deep thinking and genuine creativity. When you're constantly interacting with others or consuming external content, your mind is primarily in reactive mode, responding to inputs rather than generating original thoughts. Solitude allows your mind to shift into generative mode, where you can process experiences, make connections, solve problems, and develop insights that aren't possible when you're constantly externally focused. The practice of solitude also develops emotional regulation skills that are essential for mental strength. When you're alone with difficult emotions like anxiety, sadness, or frustration, you're forced to develop healthy ways of managing them, rather than immediately seeking external comfort or distraction. This builds emotional resilience and self-sufficiency that serves you well when facing challenges that you must handle independently. Building mental strength through solitude requires learning to sit with discomfort without immediately trying to escape it. Most people's first instinct when faced with uncomfortable thoughts or feelings is to reach for their phone, turn on entertainment, or seek out company. But true mental strength comes from the ability to remain present with whatever arises internally, whether it's pleasant or unpleasant. This tolerance for discomfort is what allows you to persist through challenges that would cause others to quit. Solitude also provides the opportunity for honest self-assessment that's impossible when you're constantly managing your image for others. When you're alone, you can drop the masks you wear in social situations and examine your authentic thoughts, feelings, motivations, and behaviors. This self-awareness is essential for growth because you can't improve what you don't acknowledge. And it's difficult to be honest about your shortcomings when you're worried about how others will perceive you. The quality of your solitude matters more than the quantity. Simply being physically alone while scrolling through social media or consuming entertainment isn't true solitude. It's just solo consumption. Meaningful solitude involves disconnecting from external inputs and turning your attention inward. This might involve meditation, journaling, walking in nature, or simply sitting quietly with your thoughts. The key is creating space for internal processing and reflection. Regular solitude also develops your ability to enjoy your own company, which is essential for psychological independence. People who are uncomfortable being alone often make poor relationship choices because they prioritize companionship over compatibility. They may stay in unhealthy relationships or seek validation from inappropriate sources simply to avoid being alone. When you genuinely enjoy your own company, you can be more selective about the relationships you pursue and maintain. Solitude provides the mental clarity necessary for making important decisions. When you're constantly influenced by others' opinions, emotions, and agendas, it's difficult to discern your own authentic desires and values. Time alone allows you to filter out external noise and connect with your inner wisdom. Many of life's most important decisions require this kind of clarity, and it's only available through periods of undistracted introspection. The practice of solitude also builds confidence in your ability to handle whatever life brings. When you've spent time alone processing difficult emotions, facing uncomfortable truths, and working through challenging problems, you develop trust in your ability to cope independently. This confidence is invaluable when facing crises or transitions that require you to rely primarily on your own resources. Building mental strength through solitude doesn't mean becoming antisocial or avoiding all human connection. It means developing the internal resources that allow you to engage with others from a position of strength rather than need. When you're comfortable with solitude, you don't need constant company to feel okay about yourself. You can contribute to relationships rather than just taking from them. You can be present with others because you're not desperately seeking validation or distraction. One of the most profound benefits of regular solitude is the development of inner peace. When you're no longer afraid of being alone with your thoughts, when you've processed your difficult emotions rather than avoiding them, when you've made peace with your imperfections and uncertainties, you develop a sense of inner calm that external circumstances can't easily disturb. This peace becomes a foundation for mental strength that supports you through all of life's challenges. The practice of solitude also connects you with your authentic voice and vision. When you're constantly influenced by others' perspectives, it's easy to lose touch with your own dreams, values, and aspirations. Regular time alone helps you distinguish between what you genuinely want and what you think you should want, based on external expectations. This clarity is essential for building a life that truly satisfies you, rather than just impressing others. Developing comfort with solitude requires gradual practice, especially if you're accustomed to constant stimulation and company. Start with short periods of undistracted alone time and gradually increase the duration as you become more comfortable. Notice your impulse to reach for distractions and practice sitting with whatever arises instead. Pay attention to the insights, emotions, and ideas that emerge when you give them space to surface. The goal isn't to become a hermit or to avoid all social interaction. The goal is to develop the mental strength and self-awareness that come from regular periods of intentional solitude. When you're comfortable being alone, when you enjoy your own company, when you can process your experiences and emotions independently, you become someone who doesn't need external validation or constant company to feel whole and confident. Remember, mental strength isn't built through external achievements or social recognition. It's built through the internal work of self-understanding, emotional regulation, and authentic self-acceptance. Solitude provides the space necessary for this work. By embracing regular periods of intentional alone time, you develop the psychological independence and resilience that allow you to navigate life's challenges with confidence and clarity, regardless of external support or circumstances. Section 9. Quit justifying yourself to skeptics. One of the most exhausting and counterproductive habits that undermines psychological independence is the compulsion to explain yourself to people who fundamentally don't understand your vision, values, or direction. This need to justify your choices to everyone drains your energy, dilutes your focus, and often leads to self-doubt as you try to articulate decisions that make perfect sense to you but seem foreign to others. Learning to stop explaining yourself to people who don't get it is essential for maintaining clarity, confidence, and momentum on your path. The urge to explain yourself often stems from a desire to be understood and accepted, which are natural human needs. However, this desire becomes problematic when you feel compelled to justify every decision to people whose understanding isn't necessary for your success or well-being. Not everyone needs to understand your choices, and their lack of understanding doesn't invalidate your decisions or reflect poorly on your judgment. The reality is that some people will never understand your path because they're looking at it through the lens of their own experiences, limitations, and fears. Someone who has never taken risks won't understand your entrepreneurial aspirations. Someone who prioritizes security above all else won't understand your pursuit of creative fulfillment. Someone who fears change won't understand your desire for growth and transformation. Their inability to understand isn't a flaw in your vision. It's a reflection of their different perspective and priorities. Explaining yourself to people who don't get it often backfires because it can actually strengthen their opposition to your choices. When you feel compelled to justify your decisions, you may come across as uncertain or defensive, which can reinforce others' doubts about your path. Additionally, the more you explain, the more opportunities you give them to poke holes in your reasoning or offer unsolicited advice based on their limited understanding of your situation. The energy you spend explaining yourself to skeptics is energy that could be better invested in executing your plans. Every hour spent defending your choices is an hour not spent implementing them. Every conversation focused on justifying your direction is a conversation that doesn't move you forward. This misallocation of energy slows your progress and can create doubt about decisions that were sound before you started second-guessing them through others' eyes. Learning to stop explaining yourself requires developing comfort with being misunderstood. This is challenging because most people have a deep need to be seen and understood by others. However, being understood by everyone is neither possible nor necessary. What matters is being understood by yourself and by the people whose opinions genuinely matter in your life. The approval of people who don't share your values or understand your vision is ultimately meaningless. One of the most liberating realizations is that you don't owe anyone an explanation for your life choices. You're not required to justify your career decisions to relatives who chose different paths. You don't need to explain your lifestyle choices to friends who made different priorities. You don't have to defend your goals to people who have settled for less than they wanted. Your life is yours to live, and their confusion about your choices is their problem to solve, not yours to fix. The people who truly matter in your life, those who love and support you, may not always understand your specific choices, but they'll respect your right to make them. They'll trust your judgment, even when they don't fully grasp your reasoning. They'll support your pursuit of what makes you happy, even if it's not what would make them happy. These are the people whose questions deserve thoughtful answers, not because you owe them explanations, but because their understanding enhances your relationship and their support aids your journey. Stopping the habit of over-explanation also requires recognizing the difference between sharing your vision with interested parties and defending it against skeptics. Sharing involves communicating with people who are genuinely curious about your path and might benefit from understanding your perspective. Defending involves trying to convince people who have already decided that your choices are wrong or misguided. The first is productive, the second is wasteful. When you do choose to explain your decisions, focus on the people who have demonstrated genuine interest in understanding rather than judging. These might be mentors, close friends, family members who support your growth, or peers who are on similar journeys. These conversations can be valuable for clarifying your thinking, receiving useful feedback, and building stronger relationships with people who matter to you. Learning to respond appropriately to unsolicited criticism or questioning is crucial for maintaining your psychological independence. Instead of launching into detailed explanations, you can simply acknowledge their perspective without accepting it as truth. Phrases like, "I understand that's how you see it," or "I appreciate your concern," allow you to be respectful without being defensive or explanatory. The practice of not explaining yourself also involves learning to sit with others' disappointment or disapproval without feeling compelled to fix it. People may be disappointed that you're not living up to their expectations or following their advice. That disappointment belongs to them. You don't have to take responsibility for managing their emotions about your choices. One effective strategy for reducing over-explanation is to develop standard responses to common criticisms or questions about your path. Having prepared responses prevents you from getting drawn into lengthy justifications and helps you maintain boundaries around discussions of your personal choices. These responses should be polite but firm, acknowledging the other person without inviting further debate. The goal isn't to become dismissive of all feedback or to ignore valuable perspectives from people who understand your situation. The goal is to become selective about when and to whom you explain your choices. You can listen to feedback without feeling obligated to justify your decisions. You can consider others' perspectives without needing their approval before moving forward. Learning to stop explaining yourself also builds confidence in your decision-making abilities. When you're constantly justifying your choices to others, you implicitly suggest that their approval is necessary for your decisions to be valid. When you make choices confidently, without feeling the need to explain them to everyone, you demonstrate faith in your own judgment and strengthen your psychological independence. The people who consistently demand explanations for your choices often do so from their own insecurity or need for control. They may feel threatened by your willingness to pursue paths they're afraid to consider. They may need you to stay small so they feel better about their own limitations. Recognizing these dynamics helps you understand that their demand for explanations often has more to do with their issues than with genuine concern for your well-being. Remember, the most successful and fulfilled people in history were often misunderstood by their contemporaries. Innovation requires going against conventional wisdom. Excellence requires making choices that average people don't understand. Growth requires leaving behind the safety of doing what everyone else expects. If you need everyone to understand your path before you pursue it, you'll end up living someone else's life instead of your own. The freedom that comes from not explaining yourself to people who don't get it is profound. You reclaim the energy you were spending on justification and redirect it toward execution. You maintain clarity about your vision instead of clouding it with others' doubts. You build confidence in your judgment instead of constantly second-guessing yourself. Most importantly, you start living authentically instead of performing for an audience that may never understand what you're trying to create. Section 10. Transform your inner voice into your greatest asset. Your inner voice is the constant stream of thoughts, commentary, and conversations you have with yourself throughout the day. This internal narrator significantly influences your emotions, decisions, behavior, and overall mental state. Most people are largely unconscious of their inner voice, allowing it to run on autopilot without considering whether it's helping or hindering their progress. Mastering this internal conversation is crucial for psychological independence because it determines whether your mind works for you or against you in pursuing your goals. The quality of your inner voice directly affects your ability to perform under pressure, maintain motivation during difficult periods, and recover from setbacks. People with destructive inner voices constantly criticize themselves, predict negative outcomes, and reinforce limiting beliefs. Those with constructive inner voices encourage themselves, focus on possibilities, and maintain perspective during challenges. The difference between these two patterns often determines who succeeds and who gives up when facing adversity. Most people's inner voice is heavily influenced by external voices from their past. Critical parents, harsh teachers, dismissive peers, or negative cultural messages. These external voices become internalized over time, creating an inner critic that continues the criticism long after the original sources are gone. Breaking free from psychological dependence requires identifying these borrowed voices and replacing them with authentic, supportive internal dialogue that serves your current goals and values. The first step in mastering your inner voice is developing awareness of what you're actually saying to yourself. Most people are shocked when they begin paying attention to their internal narrator because they realize how negative, repetitive, or unhelpful it often is. You might discover that you constantly call yourself names, predict failure, or rehearse worst-case scenarios. This awareness is essential because you can't change what you don't notice. Developing a constructive inner voice doesn't mean becoming unrealistically positive or ignoring genuine problems. It means learning to speak to yourself with the same kindness, encouragement, and objectivity you would offer a good friend facing similar challenges. Instead of harsh self-criticism, you develop gentle self-correction. Instead of catastrophic predictions, you maintain realistic optimism. Instead of dwelling on what's wrong, you focus on what's possible. One of the most important aspects of healthy internal dialogue is learning to separate facts from interpretations. Your mind constantly creates stories about what events mean, why things happen, and what outcomes are likely. These interpretations often masquerade as facts, influencing your emotions and behavior based on assumptions rather than reality. Learning to distinguish between what actually happened and what you think it means helps you respond more rationally to challenges. Effective inner voice management also involves learning to challenge unhelpful thoughts rather than automatically accepting them as truth. When your internal narrator says, "I can't do this," or "this will never work," you can challenge these statements with questions like, "What evidence supports this belief?" or "Have I succeeded at difficult things before?" This mental discipline prevents negative thoughts from spiraling into defeating beliefs. The practice of positive self-communication isn't about mindless repetition of affirmations. It's about developing a realistic but encouraging internal voice that helps you navigate challenges effectively. This voice acknowledges difficulties while maintaining focus on solutions. It recognizes mistakes while emphasizing learning opportunities. It accepts current limitations while believing in future growth. Your inner voice also affects your relationship with failure and setbacks. People with destructive internal narrators often catastrophize mistakes, turning minor setbacks into evidence of fundamental inadequacy. Those with healthy inner voices view failures as learning experiences, maintaining perspective about what setbacks actually mean for their long-term trajectory. This difference in internal response often determines who persists through challenges and who gives up prematurely. Mastering your inner voice requires developing the ability to coach yourself through difficult situations. Instead of panicking when facing challenges, you learn to talk yourself through problems systematically. You ask productive questions like, "What do I need to focus on right now?" or "What would be most helpful in this situation?" This self-coaching ability makes you less dependent on external guidance and more capable of handling unexpected situations independently. The tone of your inner voice is as important as its content. You can say the right things to yourself in a harsh, critical tone that undermines their effectiveness, or you can speak with genuine warmth and encouragement that builds confidence and resilience. Learning to adjust the emotional tone of your internal narrator helps create an internal environment that supports growth rather than sabotaging it. Developing healthy internal dialogue also involves learning to celebrate your progress and acknowledge your efforts, not just your achievements. Most people's inner voice only speaks up to criticize mistakes or point out shortcomings. A balanced internal narrator recognizes improvements, appreciates effort, and celebrates small wins along the way to larger goals. This internal recognition helps maintain motivation during periods when external validation is absent. Your inner voice significantly influences your stress levels and emotional regulation. When facing pressure, your internal narrator can either escalate anxiety by focusing on everything that could go wrong, or it can provide calm guidance by focusing on what you can control. Learning to use internal dialogue as a tool for emotional regulation helps you maintain composure and clarity in challenging situations. The practice of mastering your inner voice also involves learning to use self-communication as a performance enhancement tool. Athletes, performers, and other high achievers often develop specific internal dialogue patterns that help them perform at their best. This might involve focusing cues, confidence-building statements, or calming phrases that help manage performance anxiety and maintain focus under pressure. One crucial aspect of healthy internal dialogue is learning to be your own source of motivation and encouragement. Instead of relying on others to pump you up or provide inspiration, you develop the ability to motivate yourself through challenging periods. This internal motivation is more reliable than external sources because it's always available and specifically tailored to your situation and needs. The goal of mastering your inner voice isn't to eliminate all negative thoughts or create unrealistic optimism. It's to develop a balanced, constructive internal narrator that helps you navigate life's challenges effectively while maintaining psychological well-being. This voice acknowledges problems while focusing on solutions, recognizes limitations while believing in growth, and accepts mistakes while maintaining overall self-worth. Remember, your inner voice is one of the few things in life over which you have complete control. You can't control external circumstances, other people's behavior, or many of the challenges you'll face. But you can always choose how you speak to yourself about these experiences. This choice is one of your most powerful tools for building psychological independence and resilience. The person who masters their inner voice becomes capable of winning alone because they carry a supportive, encouraging presence with them wherever they go. They don't need external cheerleaders because they've developed the ability to coach themselves. They don't need constant validation because they've learned to recognize their own progress. They don't need others to believe in them because they've developed unshakable belief in themselves. This internal strength is what makes true independence possible. Section 11. Establish non-negotiable personal principles. Personal principles are the non-negotiable standards that govern how you behave, what you accept, and what you strive for regardless of external circumstances or other people's expectations. They're the internal benchmarks that define who you are and who you're becoming. Most people allow their principles to fluctuate based on mood, convenience, or social pressure, which creates inconsistency in their character and undermines their ability to build lasting success. Developing unshakable personal principles is essential for psychological independence because it creates internal stability that doesn't depend on external validation or circumstances. The difference between people who achieve lasting success and those who remain inconsistent lies largely in their relationship with principles. Successful people have clear, unwavering expectations for themselves that they maintain regardless of whether anyone is watching, whether they feel motivated, or whether maintaining those principles is convenient. These principles become the foundation of their identity and the source of their internal strength. Most people confuse principles with goals, but they're fundamentally different. Goals are specific outcomes you want to achieve. Principles are the behaviors and standards you commit to maintaining regardless of outcomes. A goal might be to lose 20 pounds. A principle is to treat your body with respect through consistent, healthy choices. Goals can be achieved and then abandoned. Principles are maintained for life. Goals depend on external circumstances. Principles create internal consistency. Your personal principles determine the quality of your daily experience and the trajectory of your long-term development. If your principle is to give your best effort regardless of recognition, you'll build competence and self-respect even when others don't notice your work. If your principle is to speak truthfully even when lies would be easier, you'll develop integrity and earn genuine trust. If your principle is to persist through difficulties without complaining, you'll build resilience and mental toughness. The process of developing unshakable principles begins with identifying what you truly value, not what you think you should value or what others expect you to value. Your principles must be authentic to you, because you'll be the one maintaining them when external motivation is absent. Principles that are imposed by others or adopted to impress people rarely stick because they don't align with your genuine priorities and don't generate internal motivation. Unshakable principles are specific and measurable rather than vague and abstract. Instead of having a principle to be better, you might have principles like, I complete what I start, I speak respectfully even when angry, or I invest time in learning every day. Specific principles make it clear when you're meeting your expectations and when you're falling short, eliminating the ambiguity that allows for rationalization and compromise. One of the most important characteristics of effective personal principles is that they're process-oriented rather than outcome-oriented. You can control your effort, behavior, and choices. You can't always control results, other people's responses, or external circumstances. Principles based on things within your control create consistency and build character. Principles based on uncontrollable factors create frustration and inconsistency. Maintaining high principles requires accepting that they'll sometimes be inconvenient, uncomfortable, or unpopular. There will be situations where lowering your principles would be easier, more profitable, or more socially acceptable. The test of your principles isn't whether you maintain them when it's easy. It's whether you maintain them when doing so requires sacrifice. This is where many people fail, because they treat principles as suggestions rather than commitments. The development of unshakable principles also requires learning to recover quickly when you fall short rather than abandoning them entirely. Everyone fails to meet their principles sometimes. Perfection isn't the goal. The goal is to have principles that guide you back to your desired behavior quickly when you drift off course. This means viewing lapses as temporary setbacks rather than permanent failures. Your principles should evolve as you grow, but they shouldn't fluctuate based on temporary circumstances or emotions. As you develop greater capability and maturity, you might raise certain principles or add new ones. However, the core standards that define your character should remain stable regardless of what's happening around you. This stability creates the internal consistency that allows you to trust yourself and others to trust you. Personal principles also serve as a filter for relationships and opportunities. When you have clear principles for how you treat others and how you expect to be treated, you naturally attract people who respect those boundaries and repel those who don't. When you have principles for the type of work you'll do and how you'll do it, you attract opportunities that align with your values and avoid situations that would compromise your integrity. The practice of maintaining high principles requires daily attention and commitment. It's not enough to decide on your principles once. You need to recommit to them regularly and consciously choose to uphold them in each situation where they're relevant. This daily practice strengthens your character and makes maintaining principles increasingly automatic over time. One of the most powerful aspects of having unshakable principles is that they provide clarity in decision-making. When faced with choices, you can simply ask whether each option aligns with your principles. This eliminates much of the confusion and second-guessing that paralyzes people who don't have clear standards guiding their decisions. Principles serve as a reliable compass that points you in the right direction, regardless of external pressures or temptations. Maintaining high principles also builds genuine self-confidence because it's based on your actual behavior rather than others' opinions. When you consistently act in alignment with your values, when you keep your commitments to yourself, when you maintain your standards under pressure, you develop unshakable confidence in your character. This confidence can't be taken away by criticism or setbacks because it's based on what you do, not what others think about what you do. The social benefits of having clear principles are often unexpected but significant. People respect those who have clear standards and stick to them consistently. They trust individuals whose behavior is predictable because it's guided by unwavering principles rather than changing moods or circumstances. This respect and trust create opportunities and relationships that aren't available to people who compromise their principles for short-term gains. Your principles also determine what you'll tolerate from yourself and others. People with low principles accept mediocre effort from themselves and poor treatment from others. People with high principles demand excellence from themselves and respectful treatment from others. This difference in tolerance levels significantly affects the quality of their experiences and relationships. The development of unshakable principles requires courage because it means you'll sometimes have to make unpopular choices, turn down tempting opportunities, or end relationships that don't align with your values. This courage comes from understanding that your principles aren't restrictions. They're the foundation of your freedom. They free you from the exhausting process of constantly deciding who to be and how to behave in each situation. One practical approach to developing principles is to identify areas where you currently lack consistency and establish clear expectations for your behavior in those areas. If you struggle with punctuality, you might establish a principle of arriving 5 minutes early to all commitments. If you tend to speak carelessly when angry, you might establish a principle of pausing before responding when emotions are high. The ultimate goal of developing unshakable personal principles isn't perfection, it's integrity. Integrity is the alignment between your values, words, and actions. When your behavior consistently reflects your stated principles, you develop the internal consistency that creates psychological independence. You become someone who doesn't need external validation because your self-worth is based on your adherence to your own standards rather than others' approval. Remember, your principles define who you are more than your achievements, possessions, or reputation. Achievements can be taken away, possessions can be lost, and reputations can be damaged. But your principles are always within your control. When you develop unshakable personal principles and commit to maintaining them regardless of circumstances, you create an internal foundation that supports you through all of life's challenges and changes. The person who has developed unshakable personal principles becomes capable of winning alone because they carry their own measuring stick with them wherever they go. They don't need others to define success for them because they have their own definition. They don't need external motivation to maintain excellence because their principles provide internal motivation. They don't need others' approval to feel good about themselves because they earn their own approval by living up to their own expectations. Section 12. Cultivate self-sufficiency through daily micro-decisions. Self-sufficiency isn't built through grand gestures or dramatic moments of independence. It's developed through countless small daily actions that demonstrate your ability to meet your own needs, solve your own problems, and take care of yourself without depending on others. These seemingly insignificant choices accumulate over time to create deep confidence in your ability to handle whatever life presents. The person who practices self-sufficiency in small things builds the foundation for independence in larger matters. Most people underestimate the psychological impact of their daily dependencies. They automatically reach out for help with minor inconveniences, seek others' opinions on trivial decisions, or avoid tasks they could easily learn to do themselves. While none of these individual dependencies seem significant, collectively, they reinforce a mindset of reliance on others and weaken confidence in personal capabilities. Each time you choose dependency over self-sufficiency, you send yourself a subtle message that you can't handle things on your own. The practice of self-sufficiency begins with awareness of your automatic tendencies to seek external help or validation for things you could handle independently. Before calling someone for advice, asking for help with a task, or seeking reassurance about a decision, pause and ask yourself, Could I figure this out on my own? Often the answer is yes, but the habit of external reliance prevents you from even attempting independent action. Self-sufficiency in daily actions doesn't mean refusing all help or never seeking input from others. It means choosing independence when it's reasonable and beneficial for your growth, while still being open to assistance when it's genuinely needed or valuable. The goal is to develop the default assumption that you can handle most situations yourself, with external support being an option rather than an automatic necessity. One of the most important areas for practicing self-sufficiency is problem solving. Instead of immediately asking others how to handle challenges, develop the habit of thinking through problems independently first. Consider different approaches, research solutions, and attempt to resolve issues yourself before seeking external input. This practice builds confidence in your problem-solving abilities and reduces the anxiety that comes from feeling helpless when facing obstacles. Physical self-sufficiency is another crucial area for development. Learning basic maintenance skills, cooking nutritious meals, managing your finances, and taking care of your health are fundamental aspects of adult independence. Each skill you master reduces your dependence on others and increases your confidence in your ability to take care of yourself. This confidence extends beyond the specific skills into a general sense of capability and self-sufficiency. Emotional self-sufficiency involves developing the ability to manage your emotional states without constantly seeking external comfort or validation. Instead of immediately reaching out to others when you're upset, anxious, or frustrated, practice sitting with these emotions and finding healthy ways to process them independently. This doesn't mean isolating yourself emotionally. It means developing internal resources for emotional regulation that don't depend on others' availability or willingness to provide support. The practice of self-sufficiency also extends to entertainment and stimulation. Instead of always needing others' company to enjoy yourself or external entertainment to avoid boredom, develop the ability to find satisfaction in solitary activities. Read books, pursue hobbies, exercise, create something, or simply enjoy quiet contemplation. This capacity for self-entertainment reduces social dependence and increases comfort with solitude. Information gathering is another area where self-sufficiency can be practiced daily. Instead of asking others for information, you could easily research yourself, develop the habit of finding answers independently. This not only builds research skills, but also increases your confidence in your ability to learn and understand new topics without relying on others' interpretations or explanations. Decision-making offers constant opportunities to practice self-sufficiency. For routine decisions like what to wear, what to eat, how to spend free time, or which route to take, resist the urge to seek input from others unless their preferences directly affect them. These small decisions build your confidence in your judgment and reduce the mental energy spent seeking validation for choices that only affect you. The maintenance of your living space is another important area for self-sufficiency. Learning to clean, organize, repair minor problems, and create a comfortable environment for yourself demonstrates your ability to take care of your basic needs independently. This practical competence contributes to a sense of capability that extends to other areas of life. Practicing self-sufficiency in daily actions also involves learning to celebrate your own achievements without needing external recognition. Instead of immediately sharing every success or accomplishment with others, develop the ability to feel satisfied with your progress and proud of your efforts without external validation. This internal recognition builds genuine self-confidence that doesn't depend on others' approval. Self-sufficiency in communication means expressing your thoughts and feelings directly, rather than hoping others will guess your needs or preferences. Instead of dropping hints or expecting others to read your mind, practice clear, direct communication about what you want and need. This clarity reduces misunderstandings and demonstrates respect for both yourself and others. The practice of self-sufficiency extends to learning and skill development. Instead of always seeking instruction from others, develop the ability to learn new things through reading, experimentation, and practice. While teachers and mentors can be valuable, the confidence that comes from knowing you can acquire new knowledge and skills independently is irreplaceable. Financial self-sufficiency starts with daily money management decisions. Track your expenses, understand your budget, make informed purchasing decisions, and gradually build financial knowledge and independence. Each financially responsible choice builds confidence in your ability to manage your resources and reduces anxiety about your financial future. Time management is another crucial area for self-sufficiency practice. Instead of always accommodating others' schedules or depending on external reminders and motivation, develop your own systems for managing time effectively. Plan your days, set your own deadlines, and maintain your schedule without constant external accountability. The psychological benefits of practicing self-sufficiency in small daily actions are cumulative and profound. Each independent action builds confidence in your capabilities. Each problem solved independently increases trust in your resourcefulness. Each need met through your own efforts strengthens your sense of personal power and reduces anxiety about your ability to handle future challenges. This daily practice of self-sufficiency also prepares you for larger challenges that require independence. When you've developed confidence in your ability to handle small problems, learn new skills, and meet your basic needs independently, you're better prepared to tackle major life challenges without becoming overwhelmed or overly dependent on others' support. The goal isn't to become completely self-sufficient or to avoid all interdependence with others. Humans are social beings who benefit from connection, collaboration, and mutual support. The goal is to develop enough self-sufficiency that you engage with others from choice rather than need, from strength rather than desperation, and from the ability to contribute rather than just consume. Remember, self-sufficiency is like a muscle that strengthens with use. Each time you choose to handle something independently when you could have easily sought help, you build this psychological muscle. Over time, this daily practice creates deep confidence in your ability to navigate life successfully on your own terms, making you someone who can truly win alone when necessary while still appreciating and benefiting from relationships when they're available. Section 13. Convert criticism into momentum, learning to transform criticism into fuel while maintaining your psychological equilibrium is one of the most valuable skills for achieving independence and success. Most people either crumble under criticism, becoming defensive and discouraged, or they become hardened and dismissive, missing valuable feedback that could improve their performance. The ability to extract useful information from criticism while protecting your core confidence is what separates those who grow from adversity from those who are diminished by it. Criticism is inevitable when you pursue anything meaningful. The moment you step beyond mediocrity, when you attempt something significant, when you challenge existing norms or push past comfortable boundaries, you will face criticism. Some of it will be constructive and valuable. Some will be rooted in jealousy, fear, or misunderstanding. Your ability to distinguish between these types and respond appropriately determines whether criticism becomes a tool for growth or a weapon against your progress. The first step in handling criticism effectively is understanding its source and motivation. Constructive criticism comes from people who understand what you're trying to achieve and genuinely want to help you improve. This feedback is specific, actionable, and focused on behavior or performance rather than character attacks. Destructive criticism often comes from people who feel threatened by your progress, who want to keep you small, or who are projecting their own limitations and fears onto your situation. Developing the ability to stay centered when receiving criticism requires emotional regulation skills that allow you to process feedback without immediately becoming defensive or reactive. When someone criticizes your work, your choices, or your approach, your natural impulse might be to defend yourself, counterattack, or shut down. Learning to pause, breathe, and listen before responding allows you to evaluate the criticism objectively rather than react emotionally. The practice of turning criticism into fuel begins with separating your identity from your performance. When criticism targets your work, your decisions, or your methods, it's not necessarily an attack on your worth as a person. Learning to receive feedback about what you do without internalizing it as judgment about who you are protects your core confidence while allowing you to improve your performance. One of the most powerful ways to use criticism constructively is to look for the grain of truth in even poorly delivered feedback. Someone might express their criticism harshly, emotionally, or inappropriately, but there still might be valid points buried in their delivery. Learning to extract useful information while ignoring destructive packaging requires emotional maturity and the confidence to admit when you have room for improvement. Using criticism as motivation also involves reframing it as evidence that you're attempting something significant. Mediocre efforts rarely attract criticism because they don't threaten anyone or challenge existing norms. The fact that people have strong opinions about your work or choices often indicates that you're doing something meaningful enough to notice. This reframe can transform criticism from a discouraging force into confirmation that you're on a path worth pursuing. The ultimate goal of turning criticism into fuel is to become someone who actually welcomes feedback because you've learned to extract value from it while protecting your psychological well-being. This doesn't mean enjoying harsh criticism, but it does mean appreciating the growth opportunities that come from honest feedback about your performance and decisions. Section 14. Design a life that functions independently. The ultimate expression of psychological independence is creating a life structure that functions effectively regardless of others' support, approval, or involvement. This doesn't mean living in isolation or rejecting all human connection. It means building such a solid foundation of self-reliance, internal motivation, and personal systems that external support becomes a bonus rather than a necessity. When your life works whether people support you or not, you gain the freedom to pursue your authentic path without being controlled by others' reactions or availability. Most people unconsciously design their lives around the assumption of external support. Their motivation depends on encouragement from others. Their confidence relies on validation and recognition. Their systems require other people's involvement to function properly. This creates a fragile structure that collapses when support is withdrawn, when critics become loud, or when life circumstances change the availability of their support network. Building a life that works independently requires creating robust internal systems in every important area: motivation, decision-making, emotional regulation, problem-solving, and goal achievement. These systems need to function reliably whether you're surrounded by supporters or completely alone, whether others understand your vision or think you're making mistakes, whether you receive recognition or labor in obscurity. Financial independence is often a crucial component of building a life that works without external support. While you don't need to be wealthy, you need enough financial stability to make choices based on your values rather than economic desperation. This might mean building savings, developing multiple income streams, living below your means, or acquiring skills that provide financial security. Creating a life that works independently also requires developing comprehensive problem-solving skills. You need confidence in your ability to handle unexpected challenges, learn new things, and adapt to changing circumstances without immediately seeking rescue from others. This doesn't mean never asking for help, but it means having the foundational skills and confidence to handle most situations independently when necessary. The social aspect of an independent life requires building relationships based on mutual value and genuine connection, rather than need and dependency. When you don't need others to complete you or fix your problems, you can engage with them from a position of strength and abundance. You can offer support because you have it to give rather than constantly seeking it because you lack internal resources. Remember, building a life that works independently is a gradual process that requires patience and persistence. Start by identifying your current dependencies and gradually building alternatives. Develop skills, systems, and resources that reduce your reliance on external support. Test your independence regularly and address weak points as you discover them. Over time, you'll create a life structure that provides stability, freedom, and authentic confidence regardless of external circumstances. Section 15. Become the anchor. Others seek in storms. The highest expression of psychological independence isn't isolation or self-absorption. It's becoming so internally strong and stable that others naturally turn to you for guidance, support, and leadership when they're struggling. This transformation from someone who needs strength to someone who provides it represents the ultimate mastery of winning alone. You've developed such robust internal resources that you can not only sustain yourself independently, but also offer genuine value to others from a position of abundance rather than need. The person others turn to for strength possesses certain unmistakable qualities that set them apart from those who are still dependent on external validation and support. They have a centered presence that remains stable regardless of external chaos. They demonstrate emotional regulation that allows them to think clearly under pressure. They offer perspective that comes from having faced and overcome their own challenges. Most importantly, they've learned to lead themselves so effectively that their example naturally inspires others to develop their own strength. This transition from need to abundance doesn't happen overnight or by accident. It's the result of consistently choosing growth over comfort, self-reliance over dependence, and internal validation over external approval. Every time you handle a challenge independently, every time you regulate your emotions without external help, every time you maintain your standards under pressure, you build the internal reservoir of strength that eventually overflows to benefit others. People who provide genuine strength to others have learned to set healthy boundaries that protect their own well-being while still being available to help. They understand that they can't pour from an empty cup, so they maintain their own self-care, continue their own growth, and don't sacrifice their own stability to help others. This self-protection actually enables them to be more helpful because they engage from strength rather than depletion. The ultimate expression of this transformation is when your very presence becomes a source of strength for others. They don't need you to say anything profound or do anything dramatic. Your calm confidence, your steady presence, and your quiet strength remind them of their own capacity to handle whatever they're facing. You become living proof that it's possible to develop the internal resources necessary to navigate life's challenges successfully. This journey from needing strength to providing, it doesn't mean you never need support or never face challenges. It means you've developed enough internal resources that you can handle most situations independently while remaining open to genuine connection and mutual support with others. You've learned to be both strong enough to stand alone and secure enough to stand with others. Conclusion: the paradox of winning. Alone. Here's the beautiful paradox you'll discover on this journey. When you truly learn to win alone, you don't remain alone. When you develop genuine psychological independence, when you build unshakable internal strength, when you master the art of self-sufficiency, something remarkable happens. You become magnetic to others who respect strength, who value authenticity, who seek genuine connection rather than codependency. The person who has mastered the psychology of winning alone doesn't become isolated or disconnected. Instead, they become a beacon of strength that naturally attracts others who want to develop their own independence and resilience. People are drawn to those who don't need them but choose to engage with them. There's something profoundly attractive about someone who is complete in themselves yet still open to meaningful connection. This is the ultimate freedom, the ability to be fully yourself, to pursue your authentic path, to maintain your direction and standards regardless of external circumstances, not because you're avoiding people, but because you've built something inside that no one can take away. You've developed an internal foundation so solid that external storms can't shake it. The journey to winning alone isn't about becoming invulnerable or perfect. It's about becoming resilient, self-aware, and internally directed. It's about building systems that support you when external support disappears. It's about developing an inner voice that encourages rather than defeats you. It's about establishing principles that guide you when the path isn't clear. It's about trusting yourself when others doubt you. Every chapter of this journey builds upon the last. When you stop waiting for rescue and take full responsibility for your outcomes, you begin. When you build your internal scorecard and generate your own motivation, you strengthen. When you take ownership of your emotions and design personal frameworks, you stabilize. When you trust your judgment and release the need for approval, you liberate yourself. When you embrace solitude and stop explaining yourself, you find clarity. When you master your inner voice and establish unshakable principles, you build character. When you cultivate self-sufficiency and convert criticism into fuel, you develop resilience. And when you design a life that functions independently and become a source of strength for others, you complete the transformation. This isn't a destination you reach and then abandon. It's a practice you maintain throughout your life. There will be moments when you struggle, when old patterns resurface, when you temporarily lose your center. That's part of being human. The difference is that you now have the tools, the awareness, and the internal resources to find your way back quickly. The psychology of winning alone isn't about isolation. It's about integration. It's about integrating all parts of yourself into a cohesive whole that doesn't depend on external validation to feel complete. It's about becoming so comfortable with who you are that you no longer need to perform for others' approval. It's about developing such a clear sense of direction that others' confusion doesn't cloud your vision. You'll know you've truly mastered this psychology when you notice these shifts. You stop seeking permission for your choices. You make decisions quickly because you trust your judgment. You maintain your emotional equilibrium regardless of how others treat you. You find satisfaction in your progress without needing external recognition. You can sit in silence without discomfort. You speak your truth without needing others to agree. You pursue your goals with quiet confidence. You offer help from abundance rather than seeking it from scarcity. The world needs more people who have mastered the psychology of winning alone, not because we need more isolated individuals, but because we need more psychologically independent people who can contribute to relationships and communities from strength rather than neediness. We need people who can stand firm in their values when pressured to compromise. We need people who can maintain clarity when others are panicking. We need people who can offer genuine support because they've learned to support themselves first. So here's your invitation. Start small, but start today. Choose one area where you're currently dependent and begin building independence. Maybe it's seeking less approval for your decisions. Maybe it's developing a morning routine that doesn't depend on others' energy. Maybe it's sitting with uncomfortable emotions instead of immediately reaching out for comfort. Maybe it's trusting your judgment on small decisions without consulting everyone. Each small step builds the foundation. Each independent action strengthens the muscle. Each time you choose self-reliance over dependence, you're investing in your psychological freedom. And one day, you'll look back and realize you've transformed from someone who needed other strength into someone who provides it. That's the psychology of winning alone, not avoiding connection, but choosing it from wholeness rather than neediness. Not rejecting support, but not requiring it for your fundamental well-being. Not becoming invulnerable, but becoming resilient. Not isolating yourself, but becoming complete in yourself. The strongest version of you isn't waiting for the right circumstances, the perfect support system, or universal approval. The strongest version of you is built in the quiet moments when no one's watching. When you choose discipline over comfort, truth over popularity, growth over safety, and independence over dependence, you already have everything you need. The power was always within you. You just needed to stop giving it away to external validation and start building it internally. Now, you know the path. Now you have the framework. Now the only question is, will you walk it? The psychology of winning alone isn't about winning against others. It's about winning the most important battle, the one inside yourself. It's about becoming someone who doesn't break when the wind changes direction. Someone who doesn't need constant cheerleading to maintain momentum. Someone who can face themselves honestly and still move forward with confidence. This is your invitation to become that person. Not someday, not when conditions are perfect, but now, today, in this moment. Because the truth is simple. Nobody is coming to save you. But you don't need saving. You need to remember your own strength, develop your own systems, trust your own judgment, and build your own foundation. That's the psychology of winning alone. And once you master it, you'll discover you've won something far more valuable than any external achievement. You've won yourself back.